Okay, we are recording to the cloud and we're live on YouTube. So I am Sharon Calitro, the Planning Director in Danbury. This is the POCD Committee, Oversight Committee for July 20th, 2021. I'll call the meeting to order at 4:04. We have a quorum. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 13 members present. We're going to be talking about all things transportation today. Before I turn it over to Francisco, if anybody, I'll take a motion to accept the minutes of the meeting on June 15th. Everybody got a copy of it attached to the agenda.
So moved.
Motion by Fred to approve the minutes from June 15th. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Juan. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, I'll just jump right into letting Francisco take over. We have a lot to talk about, a lot of good information to present as usual, and then we'll get to that and the balance of our agenda. So let me share the screen.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, great. First of all, great to see you all again. Here we are, kind of midway through summer. Can you believe it? And trying to go to presentation mode here. All right, and I take it you can all see my screen fine. Good, good. Well, this is our 9th meeting. And before I jump into things, I am joined by a couple of my colleagues. Real quick, Parker, can you say hello, briefly introduce yourself?
Great. Can you hear me, Francisco?
I can.
Great, great. My name is Parker Sorensen. I'm a senior engineer at FHI Studio. I've been helping Francisco on the transportation section of the POCD.
All right, great. Thanks, Parker. And you've met Marcy before, but Marcy is joining us this evening. Marcy, can you say hello?
Hello, all. I've met Sharon and others. I'm the lead public involvement, community engagement person in Connecticut and New England, and I'm happy to help out on this project. I also work on other Danbury projects, including Route 37 and I-84 Danbury. So hopefully we can add value by, doubling up on certain things.
Great. Thank you, Marcy. Okay, our agenda for today is all things transportation and infrastructure as related to the roadways. We'll give you a very high level overview, and Parker, who's done much of this work, is going to walk you through this. And as always, if you have questions or comments, feel free to speak up. Let's engage as we go. This isn't just a presentation. This is intended to be conversation, as it always is. So we'll take a look at existing transportation plans and studies and what the implications are for Danbury. We'll take a very high-level view of your existing infrastructure, and I think you're all pretty well aware of what Danbury has with respect to transportation infrastructure. We'll review the ongoing maintenance and capital improvements that are conducted, of which it's a really big list. It's quite impressive. And I'll when we get to that point, I'll turn things over to Tim, maybe to give us an overview of the work that's being done by the city. We'll briefly talk about additional city infrastructure. When I say additional, I mean sewer, water, stormwater, all the infrastructure that's tied to, connected to, underneath the roads that are not in and of themselves transportation, but are really linked to your transportation system. And then we'll have an open conversation if there's any thoughts you have about transportation infrastructure needs in the city as we think ahead over the next 10 years. And then Marcy will give us a brief overview of our thoughts about rolling out the public engagement campaign for this fall. All right, well, with that said, I'd like to turn it over to Parker now. And Parker, the floor is yours. You'll just excuse me if I chime in from time to time to make a comment that I think probably should be added to the conversation. But it's yours. I'll try to stay out of your way.
No worries. Thank you, Francisco. So first, we just want to take a look at very high level trends and traffic in Danbury. This is data from the American Community Survey, a U.S. Census product. Really big picture, 75% of residents driving to work, another 15% are carpooling. So a big takeaway. I'm sure we're all aware of this, the community. The roadway network in Danbury is very important, as well as the automobile. Only 4% use public transportation and only 2% walk to work. How will COVID impact the commuting trends? You see the work at home slice that might increase, but that might be something that we take a look at into the future. We took a look at, excuse me as I minimize this. Took a look at trends at select locations. These are tube counts or traffic counts that the Connecticut Department of Transportation conducts on from time to time, usually every 3 years, in various locations in the city. We took 12 locations throughout the city and 12 interchange ramp locations. Shown in blue are the non-highway locations, and you'll see that that's dipped a little bit, but been relatively stable since 2004. And I just want to point out that that really mirrors a trend that we see for a lot of similar communities in Danbury around the state. I-84 traffic in Danbury has remained stable over that time. We just want to point out what has changed since 2004, 2007. Really, navigation apps have popped up and allow people to otherwise avoid heavily trafficked routes that they might have otherwise been in before these navigation apps were prevalent. So these are really the major corridors in Danbury, is what's shown on the blue line.
Yeah, and to add what Parker was saying, just taking a look at the blue line would suggest that traffic is decreasing in Danbury. This is just an index. And what this data tells us, it has decreased at those 12 locations. What we don't know is where that traffic has gone. And we think that it's shifted to neighborhood roads, local roads, other locations that are less heavily trafficked, due in part to the use of traffic apps like Google Maps and those type of apps. I think what this graph is telling us, if anything, is that traffic in Danbury has remained probably pretty stable since 2004. It may have shifted around, and it may have shifted in time of day with more pronounced peaks, but you're most likely haven't had an increase in volume throughout the city in aggregate over that period of time, even though the perception might be otherwise. Okay.
Thank you.
Back to you, Parker.
Took a look at how many linear feet of roadway per capita or per resident. The city of Danbury is one of the denser cities in Fairfield County. Has about 15 feet of roadway for every resident. And that compares to about 21 feet of roadway for every resident in the county as a whole, and 26 linear feet in the state. And we just want to note this. Francisco is going to talk about more on the capital side later in this presentation. But obviously, keeping this lower number is advantageous to keeping costs lower for city residents. So there might be, say, private roadways that were built over time for specific developments. Obviously, if the city starts to bring on some of those under public ownership, that will impact this number in the upward direction, and obviously have an impact on infrastructure budgets. Took a look at safety between 2012 and 2020. About 3,000 incidents per year on average. Just a few highlights. Around 2015, a couple things happened. You see this big increase. There is a change in the reporting system that was used by the state, so that is some of the increase. But we also want to note, the mid 2010s, cell phones became, smartphones became really prevalent in that time as well. So you see somewhat of an increase in general between 2013 and 2016. 2020, there's a sharp decrease. We all experienced this. Less traffic resulted in less crashes. We took a look at where these crashes are occurring. So this is on your right, the heat map. Blue and cooler colors show areas where there are few crashes, and the red shows areas where there is many crashes, and that yellow is like a moderate number of crashes. Perhaps not surprisingly, the crashes are really strongly associated with these corridors that are heavily trafficked. There's more intersections, essentially more activity. Certainly in the center of the map, downtown Danbury, but we also see I-84, Route 7, Newtown Road, and some of the like Federal Street, some of the other corridors standing out as well. The next slide shows specifically bicycle and pedestrian crashes. Those are really concentrated downtown. Not surprisingly, that's where our pedestrian activity is. That's where people are crossing the road. That's where we're seeing the crashes. So generally speaking, that's what some of the trends that we see on the state and national data sources. I want to take a look at what the transportation plans and studies that we found that are relevant to this plan in the city of Danbury. WestCog, which is the Regional Transportation Planning Agency, completed in 2020 a regional safety plan, which included the city of Danbury and all of WestCog member towns. And really high level, 3 high crash corridors in Danbury were identified. Again, some of those major routes. 9 high crash intersections were identified, as well as specific countermeasures for 5 specific roadways at the bottom. So that's a really good resource to that the city can use moving forward. I'm sure everyone in this meeting is aware of the I-84 Danbury project, which really covers between exit 8 and the New York Connecticut state line. Really big picture, the goals to increase highway capacity, mobility, and safety. Get some feedback. Thank you. Reducing some of those left exits, increasing the roadway width to 3 lanes throughout the city of Danbury, but also where possible, improving multimodal connections with commuter parking, bike-ped travel, especially under and over the highway, and any transit connections where possible. So that's a really major planning project that Marcy mentioned. She's on this call. That is ongoing, that the city should be paying attention to moving forward.
And given that we have Marcy on the call, Marcy, can you give us just a 1-minute briefing on where the project is at in terms of its overall schedule? And you're on mute. In case you're speaking, you're on mute right now. Okay, maybe Marcy has me muted. All right, we'll keep going. We can.
Yeah, I'm looking for her. I know she was off, got probably bumped out, and I let her. Oh yeah, she's here.
She's here, but okay.
Yeah.
All
okay.
right, that's fine. That's fine. We can keep going. She could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, I can talk. Roger and I both sit on the PAC committee.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Sharon.
Yeah. So I mean, we're starting to look at like the needs and deficiency study. Were done, and the PAC group, which meets like quarterly, is starting to look at some conceptual ideas to meet the goals of the study, and different options on things, and just commenting. So it's an iterative process, I think, and it will take some time in terms of the planning, construction money. So the planning process is funded. The construction end of this is not funded. It's billions of dollars. So I'm not really sure where that's going to be, but slated for, late 2020, Roger, maybe early part of 2030. But it's some time out because after
Right.
this process, there's a whole NEPA process they have to go through. So,
Right.
yeah, it'll take some
Okay.
time. We have continued to express, one sec, Marcy. We have continued to express the impact of I-84 on the city of Danbury. What happens when I-84 gets backed up? What happens to our local roads? If there's a
Right.
crash on 84 and things like that, we just basically come to a standstill as well. And so we're very sensitive to that, all of the city people and representatives that are on this committee, to the state and their consultants and the rest of the PAC group.
Okay, thanks, Sharon. All right.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah, go ahead,
Francisco?
Marcy. Yeah, like, just 30 seconds.
Yeah,
your
I'll be
perspective
very
here.
quick. I have no idea what's going on with my sound, but yeah, so that process, so that was the Route 37 project was an 18-month project that we are on the tail end of now. And the draft report is out. It's on the website for WestCog's website. So we can also send that.
You're getting ahead of us, Marcy. We're not on 37 yet. We're still on 84, but.
We're on, okay. So 84, okay. So 84 is early. Sorry. And then, yeah, so that's like a,
Well, let's go to 37 because it's our next slide. And Marcy, seeing as how you're as familiar with the plan as anyone, why don't you give us just the broad overview about what it is?
All right. So Route 37 is a corridor study that goes from 84, the exit ramps at 6, all the way up to New Fairfield Center. And they wanted to look at the cities of Danbury and the town of New Fairfield came together, and they wanted to look at a couple of different things. One is how to reduce congestion around certain interchanges, as well as what is the possibility and practicability of building a trail along the reservoir, the Lake Marjorie Reservoir. So we looked at all of those things. The draft report is out. It's posted on the WestCog website. And at this point, all we have left to do to wrap up that study is present to both councils, the city of Danbury as well as the town of New Fairfield, which I expect will happen within the next 30 days.
Okay, great. Thank you.
And Danbury, I-84 Danbury will go on for a while. I guess that's the only thing I have to add for that.
Yeah, Sharon definitely impressed upon us the long range.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm like actually calling in now because my internet went out. So
okay. Oh, okay. Well, we're glad we didn't totally lose you. All right, Parker, back to you.
Thank you, everyone. Lastly, in our plans and studies relevant to the city of Danbury, CT Active Transportation Plan, which is dealing with all things bicycling and pedestrian. It's a statewide plan, really sponsored by the Connecticut State Department of Transportation. So this is broader than the city of Danbury. But just a note that the plan designates multiple potential bike routes in the city of Danbury, including Route 37, Route 53, Route 202, as well as some local routes. I just want to be clear that the plan is really is not any specific construction plan or recommendation for facilities. It's really just looking at where are the best routes in the state to connect point A to point B. The city of Danbury in Western Connecticut is really at the crossroads, north, south, east, and west of several different routes. So that's why there are several routes included.
Okay.
Some more specific ongoing efforts include the Still River Greenway, and we should also note the Norwalk River Valley Trail. These are really combined in this red line. It's really conceptual bicycle greenway route connecting Danbury to Ridgefield through to Norwalk, and then to the north to Brookfield. Various segments in the city of Danbury exist as hiking trails or public parks. But really at this point through the city, it's really just a vision with no specific alignment. But really the idea is that it would be a trail that would be accessible to both bicyclists and pedestrians broadly along the Route 7 corridor.
Yeah, and if I could just butt in for a second, Parker. So as many of you know, I mean, there are sections of the Greenway that that are accessible out at Commerce Park. There's easements that we've accepted over time. There is actually no succinct connection to the southern end of the Brookfield trail. Brookfield is in, as you all know, and that is a walking and I think a bike trail as well.
Mhm.
And then south of us, I mean, the portion that's in Danbury, south of kind of, 53 through Wabeeka is, there's significant grades, it's wooded, there's some wet areas, but the long-term goal is to try to get that trail, to be functional. And then south of that in Norwalk, they're pretty, it's pretty busy. I mean, I've seen people bike and biking and walking on it. So yeah, that's, I think, something that we want to maintain and endorse, especially as a result of kind of the pandemic and the situation getting outside and for the health of the residents. It's become very, very popular.
Great. Thank you, Sharon.
Could I just ask a quick question on the previous slide? You had West Street listed. Is that, Lake Street, is that referring to Lake Avenue and Lake Avenue Extension?
Yes, I think it is. It's just a typo. Yeah, okay. West Street and Lake Avenue Extension.
Okay, yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Parker, back to you.
So overall, specifically taking a look at the actual infrastructure that the city of Danbury maintains. There's an extensive network of local roadways, state highways. Of course, we know interstate highways, Route 84, Route 7, as well as commuter and freight rail, specifically commuter rail Metro North. So we'll take a look at each of those modes in the next few slides. Bridges, the city of Danbury, according to the National Bridge Inventory, has 93 bridges within its borders, both local and state maintained. And they are rated by the inventory as either good, fair, or poor, and those are mapped on the right. So you'll see that there's 3 red dots indicating bridges in poor condition, according to the inventory. And ongoing bridge projects are funded through the city capital improvement program and other state programs. And Francisco's going to get into some of that later.
Yeah.
Railroads. Railroad corridors include the Housatonic Railroad and the Metro North Railroad. Of course, most of us should be familiar with the Metro North branch line service that currently terminates in downtown Danbury, providing service to New York City. I just want to note the third bullet, and this has been in the news a lot recently, is there's currently a feasibility study for the potential extension of Metro North service of some sort from New York, Brewster area probably, to the Danbury station. And that's just a feasibility study being conducted at this time, and that's ongoing.
Yeah, I'll just jump in just for a time frame and frame of reference. So as many of you know, this was discussed. We focused heavily on the TOD, the Downtown Danbury TOD plan on transportation. And one of the ideas that came out of that was kind of to promote this east-west connection. for the railroad, to the railroad using the old Maybrook line or Housatonics line, an easement area. So as a result of that study, then NIMTIC, which is the New York Metropolitan Transportation Council, along with Putnam County, funded a feasibility study that we participated in the scoping of, to determine, again, the feasibility and ridership interest and levels, for New Metro North to determine whether or not it's feasible for them to continue service directly from, with a direct connection from Southeast into downtown Danbury. Not a shuttle, because we think of shuttles as like the bus shuttle, but actually extending the train line. So the end stop would, instead of Southeast, would be Danbury. That study was held up a little. Roger's on the line as well, and has been participating on the city's behalf. But that study, the NIMTIC and Putnam County hired a consultant. That study is slated to be completed now in February of 2022, and we'll be able to gauge kind of the appetite for Metro North, to continue that. There's some challenges, obviously, but there's, in the realm of trying to make a rail connection, there's very few times where I think we could say, wow, there's old tracks there, and why don't we just update them? And it's not it's a lot of work and millions of dollars, I'm sure, but and there's federal money for those kinds of infrastructure projects. So we just have to gauge the appetite of Metro North for making that investment in their system, and based on their ridership. It has a lot of significant and potential economic impacts for the city of Danbury, as well as relieving congestion and air quality impacts on the interstate. We would get people out of their single occupancy cars onto public transit. People who are commuting, north of Danbury, south of Danbury, and east of Danbury, across the state line, taking up parking spaces on the New York side or going to a New York station, because there's many more trains and options and times of trains on the Harlem line than, as we all know, are on the branch line. So there's a lot of benefits for the city of Danbury, to get that done. So
Sharon?
Yes.
We talk about proposed bike trails. There's actually a bike trail that's under construction right now from Farrington to Brewster, or if you want to look at it another way, from Brewster to Farrington,
yes, along
that very rail trail. And I was talking to the engineers a couple of weeks ago, and I said, the city of Danbury is considering using this line for a commuter railroad, and they flipped out. They said, "Are you kidding? We're putting a fence in." I said, "I see you're putting a fence in." He said, "How are you guys going to use this as a rail trail if we're putting in a bike path?" I said, "I don't know. I don't know if anybody knows this. They're building it right now. They're putting in drainage. They're putting in 2-foot PVC pipe. They're putting in the culverts. They're doing all that stuff. And they're commencing the pavement. And it's going to go literally from downtown Brewster right to Farrington. And that's your rail trail. They're not touching the existing tracks, but the guys that were doing this were a little bit nonplussed that the trail could hold both a bike path and a commuter railroad. But I said, well, I'm sure that they know that. I'm not sure that Danbury knows this. So
yeah, we know
I'm
that.
passing it along. Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we do know up until the Connecticut line, that's been occurring. And so the discussions with them, I don't want to get off the target. We can have offline discussions about this, but they were all, we wanted to kind of do the combination, and their concern was, people next to their active trail line. And so, it's something that we have to look into. In a no train situation, perfect opportunity for a trail. Sure. But we want to be able to try to make that connection and provide a trail, whether it's adjacent to it, nearby, it's excess right of way, that all has to be figured out. But yeah, we're familiar with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, let's move on to the next slide, talk about your bus transit. Parker?
Sure. So Hart Transit in the city of Danbury operates 7 routes, roughly highlighted to the right. And you can see kind of radial from what is called the Pulse Point in downtown Danbury. I'm sure many are aware. Recently, like other transit systems, the pandemic has had a pretty significant impact on ridership of the HART transit system. However, ridership is expected to rebound. You talk about funding challenges, continues to be a challenge as moving forward. And then the Pulse Point itself, with the 7 routes coming into a single location in downtown, there's been ongoing discussions to relocate this Pulse Point closer to the train station to make that multimodal connection a little bit easier. Definitely an asset that we want to keep track of.
Okay.
Then finally, we want to talk a little bit about bike ped. On the pedestrian side, of course, we have a sidewalk network highlighted really in this magenta color. You can see that that's really concentrated in downtown Danbury itself, with some significant gaps as you get outside of downtown. Surrounding neighborhoods have little infrastructure at all. However, the city's zoning regulations have been supporting the development of new sidewalks with projects by requiring their construction, etc. Then lastly, bicycle infrastructure within the city. There's very little currently, no bike lanes, shared use paths, etc. However, note that this is the 2012 Greater Danbury Regional Bike Plan. Indicates that the greatest area of bicycling demand is found in the downtown Danbury area, as well as east-west along the I-84 corridor to Bethel, Brookfield, etc. So you'll see that highlighted in the red color. So no biking facilities yet, but definitely something that there might be demand for in the future. Thank you.
All right. I'd like to talk about all of the work that is going on related to transportation infrastructure, whether that be maintenance work or work that is funded through the current capital improvement budget. And I've got a bunch of projects here. I'm not going to read them all. We wanted to get them into the presentation so that you could review on your own if you're interested. And I think we want to impress upon you or remind you of just all of the work that does go on a year-to-year basis. By example, we have roadway and sidewalk work with a number of projects that are funded, being planned, under construction at the moment. There's a wide array here, and so I've got 5 or 6 slides to this effect, but I'd like to turn it over to Tim if you want to, Tim Nolan, if you want to talk at all about the kind of work that you folks do on an annual basis, what you're working on now, and what is lined up in the near future.
Well, City of Danbury Public Works Department controls all of the properties owned by the City of Danbury. So we have superintendents that look after facilities. We have superintendents that look after the roadways, the parks, the equipment maintenance, the forestry department, and we have a superintendent that looks after our utilities, both sewer and water, as well as a construction manager superintendent that does major capital improvement projects. So everything owned by the City of Danbury, the Public Works Department maintains. I saw that you had some bridges downtown that were in poor shape. I believe those are the Still River bridges that are on the capital list to be done relatively soon. That's an old system that was put in. And for anyone who's listening that doesn't realize, a bridge doesn't necessarily mean a big span that you can see and drive under or walk under. Some of these bridges are just culverts that water travels through, but meets the requirement by the state of a bridge. And the state does a review of all of our bridges every 2 years. And that drives our system of review and maintenance. So we have a complete list of that, and we're we're constantly on top of it and asking for the money to replace those, even though you don't see them. And that takes tight coordination so that I don't put in a road and they come in the next year and fix a bridge and or put in a gas line and or upgrade the water, so on and so forth. But right now, of course, we have the big sidewalk job, first phase that Sharon was directly involved with, and Tom Hughes is executing out in on City Center Danbury, of which Eversource was brought in at the last minute and said they had to put a gas main in, and we will be paving that road hopefully next month when Eversource is complete and the contract is complete. Quickly on road stats, we have 240 miles of road in Danbury, and of course, if you use 10 years as a road life, that means that you have to do 24 miles of road improvements a year to meet that. Of course, 10 miles is not a really accurate road life, as some roads, there are variables. Some roads have a great deal of traffic. 2,000 vehicles per day is a high traffic road, and we have cul-de-sacs. So to meet those requirements of road life, we have to have some cul-de-sacs go 20 years, and some of the higher roads, higher traffic roads, have to be rebuilt more often. And our program includes rebuilding, which rebuilding means either milling or paving, and includes drainage and infrastructure improvements, as well as looking at icing conditions that can be improved, basically improving the road so we can walk away from it and the problems don't exist there any longer. And then we have maintenance, which we're starting to implement as well. And that's basically putting a cover on an existing road that's a little bit older that will extend the life of that road for a period of time. And we're looking at means and methods used throughout the state that apply to different types of roads, depending upon their traffic, depending upon how they've been rated, which basically looks at how the road is breaking down and what's causing that road to break down. So that together, this year alone, we're going to be paving and maintaining around 20 miles of roads. So now we're starting to get to the point where if we can continue this, stop rebuilding roads more often because we're getting caught up with those roads, and maintain them more often, whereas rebuilding a road costs more than double to maintain it, then we can start spending more money and getting more value for our dollar on road maintenance, and start getting those miles per year of improved roadway infrastructure to be increased, so we can get to that 240 miles a year within 10 or 15 years. And that certainly is our objective. One of the things I must say is also that we do all this by through personnel. We'd like to move forward, and we've been looking into asset management programs that would make this a much easier task, and certainly a great tool to use to be able to forecast where we're going down the road for budgeting, as well as to make it so that we can show everyone what we're doing and show where we're going next year. And so those are the kinds of things we're going to be moving forward on. But our evaluation of the roads are all year long. We reevaluate them in the spring, and that evaluation process is by being out there and looking at roads. And it's also driven by complaints by people who live on the roads mostly. And then we prioritize those roads based on a rating system, which is national. There are 3 national rating systems can be used. It's basically 1 through 100 or 10 through 100. However you want to look at it, it's ranking it in excellent condition or down to poor condition, and we prioritize based on that. And then we either mill and pave, reclaim and pave, which is rebuilding and or maintain our roads. What else do I have for you? Basically, if you wanted to talk about critical infrastructure in our road system, we just went through, as Paul knows, last few years we've maintained and increased our discussions with Eversource, because they're one, they've gone through a great deal of change over the last few years, and we found that who we spoke to last year was no longer there this year when we spoke to them, so that there was no continuity working with us on our roadways. And we'd find that we'd put a paving schedule together, and they would come along and say, no, we're going to remove and replace the cast iron mains. Well, that's improved because we've improved our communication with them by increasing the amount of talks we've had with them annually. And we're finding much better coordination with them. And so we're not having problems, whereas, they're digging up new roadways. But that's always going to be a problem because we still have an aging infrastructure under the road in water and sewer. And so we have to look at where we spend the money to improve based on variables such as how many water main breaks have you had in that neighborhood, and when are we going to get that water main replaced. So there's a lot involved with those roads in a high water main break neighborhood may have to go to completely unable to maintain them. After it gets to a point a road cannot be maintained, then it's really $0 until the road's dead. You're not going to put much into it except filling some potholes. We don't like to see that happen, and we also don't want to spend $20 in a square yard to improve a road that we know will be dug up over the next few years. So there's quite a bit of coordination with the road program that we have. And I don't know if you wanted me to go into some other critical infrastructure areas.
Yeah, well, maybe we can flip through this list. I've got a pretty broad list pulled primarily from your CIP program. And if there's anything notable that you see on the list, feel free to speak up and comment. Okay?
Well, we do compartmentize our work a bit. So some of these things are handled by engineering, and I'm aware of them, not involved directly with them. So I really don't want to speak about scheduling or, what direction they're headed, because I'm not in that meeting.
Okay. Yeah. And once
saw
again,
from the capital improvement list that we provide that have to be whittled down to what can be funded, that, we're constantly upgrading that list and making sure everything's on that list, and eventually the money will be appropriated.
Right. So this is a big list, and as I mentioned, we're not going to read through things, but I did want to impress the Oversight Committee with the fact that there is a lot of work that's being planned for and funded across the city as related to transportation infrastructure. And this isn't even including what I'll call facilities, which are buildings and athletic facilities and all that stuff. This is hard infrastructure and transportation infrastructure. So a number of roadway and sidewalk projects across the city, intersection improvements, whether it be for safety, for operations, or any other particular needs. A number of intersections are targeted on the capital improvement list. It goes on as 2 pages of intersections alone, and as well as railroad crossing improvements at, I believe, more than one location. Bridge improvements, we talked a little bit about this earlier. There are a number of bridges that are in the process of repair or are funded for repair or planned for repair. Related to that somewhat is drainage and stormwater management. This city is mandated by the state to comply with an MS4 stormwater permit. The city conduct an initial study and plan as to how they're going to comply. It has to provide annual reports with respect to compliance. This is a pretty heavy lift with respect to reporting, and it does compel the city to do certain things to really try to minimize the amount of runoff directly into water bodies that is untreated in any way, and a bunch of other measures that the city is responsible for doing, including communicating with residents to help minimize the amount of waste that gets into the stormwater system. So that's ongoing, as well as specific improvements to drainage basins and channels across the city. And we pulled out one capital improvement project just to highlight because of its prominence. That would be the Main Street Streetscape project. And Sharon, can you talk just a little bit about this project, where it's at? And
Sure. So many of you know, we are undertaking phase 1 of the downtown Danbury Streetscape Renaissance project. Was funded through the CIP, through various city bonds and grants that we got. The total cost is about $12 million. Phase 1 is around the Danbury Green and the streets adjacent to it. So again, you know, the sidewalks were reconstructed 30 years ago. The trees are many of them are stressed at the end of their lifespan. You know, the sidewalks were heaving. There were asphalt patches in them. And so, you know, we came up with a plan and a program, and we're fortunate enough to apply for some significant grant money from the state to be able to introduce a new design. We split the project into 2 phases. So as I said, phase 1, we went out to bid for just after the beginning of this year. Bid was awarded. We started construction in May, I guess. And that is underway. If you go down, you know, along the ice rink, you'll see the contractor there, again, being supervised by Public Works, with our involvement, of course, as well. And then phase 2 is really focused along Main Street from about St. Peter's Church north to Crosby, and then those streets adjacent to it: Liberty, Patriot, Elm, a little bit of Elm, a little bit of White. And we focused the area, and were again awarded a grant because we were trying to connect land uses with transit options, how to get people safely and appropriately from the uses along Main Street and the surrounding neighborhoods to the train station and the bus station. So that's if you're looking at an aerial extent of that project, that the focus was to you know, make that walk more pedestrian friendly, safer, updated, you know, fix issues and problems that, you know, have arisen over the last 30 years. It does include some proposed shallow lanes, which is a shared bus bike lane. I'm sorry, bike and vehicular lane along Main Street. And that is because, you know, the real estate there, it's just wide. You want to increase the width of the road, you decrease the width of the sidewalks. We want people downtown, we want people walking. So we did not want to do that. And so the best opportunity to provide some kind of bike access was to put in these shallow lanes. Still has to be reviewed and approved, because all of you know, Main Street is a DOT, State Route 53. So it still has to go through that process. But we did not have to go through the state district review process for phase 1 because, you know, Delay Street and National and Ives and Railroad are all city streets. So while the grant included both portions of the project along Main Street and in phase 1, phase 1 has to go through a different review process, another level of review, or phase 2, I'm sorry. along Main Street. So that is underway. It's fully funded. We thank the council for the bond money. We'll make it work. It'll look great. We took the trees down. Yes, there's an uproar. It'll, new trees will be planted, over 200 just in phase one. No, I guess in phase one and phase two. There's 60 or 70 in phase one that we took down. And I could tell you that some adjacent to some of the buildings along the green, the property owners were very excited that those trees were coming down. So city center is happy with the design. I think the community as a whole is happy about it. You can go on the website and on the department's website and see some pictures of what we hope it will look like at the end. So we're excited about this project.
All right, thank you, Sharon.
Francisco, if I can interject just.
Yeah, Tim, go ahead.
And no, I just want to make it clear that Main Street, the state of Connecticut still has an obligation and a responsibility, even though we have an agreement with them for basically snow plowing. It's still their drainage and it's still their roadway, and improvements are going to, following the sidewalk work that's being done out there. We're starting to see issues with both the pavement as well as the drainage, and it's something we're going to have to address following the completion of the sidewalk work. And I have been in touch with them, and they are aware of it, but I have heard no plans from them. So we're going to start pursuing that.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Tim.
And just a reminder, again, not just to focus on this, I mean, that infrastructure is really old. I mean, those catch basins are stone, some of them. And so you can just imagine, the problem, like even opening them. So yeah, we have to kind of tread lightly in some areas, but Tim's 100% right.
Okay, thank you. All right, and as I mentioned earlier, in addition to the transportation infrastructure, the city manages the stormwater system, the city's water supply system, city's wastewater system, all of which very closely follow the road infrastructure. They are located within your roads or under your roads. Very quick overview, your stormwater infrastructure, each one of those dots is a small piece of infrastructure located throughout the city, so that you see that network is incredibly extensive. And as I mentioned before, in maintaining compliance with its stormwater permit and with the state, the city is employing what we call LID, which is low impact design and development measures to try to help mitigate the impacts of stormwater runoff. And that's under consideration, and there are measures being currently employed by the city. So that's an ongoing challenge, is to better manage that system and maintain it. Your water distribution system, there are not a whole lot of municipalities in Connecticut that manage their own water supply. It's not unique to Danbury, but a lot of places have either a private supplier or a separate district that is established to manage water. And the city manages, distributes, maintains most of the water throughout the city. There are some private systems or privately managed systems. Aquarian manages some smaller systems across the city, and there are some smaller community-based water systems, as well as plenty of properties that have their own wells. But most of the city is supplied with drinking water by the city's drinking water supply system, which includes reservoirs and wells and water purification treatment plants, and of course all the pipe and water main to get it there. The map at the right is just a map indicating areas that are lower and higher in elevation, so that those colors don't mean different types of water service, but rather elevations. But I think the point to impress upon you is just how much of this city, the city is supplied by water that is maintained and managed by the city itself and by the utility department of the city. Some stats about that. It's 6 million gallons of water per day are distributed through the system. And as I mentioned, there are actually 8 reservoirs, a well site, 2 water treatment plants, pump stations, storage tanks, 200 miles of water pipe. That would be the main. That's not even including laterals to homes. 2,100 fire hydrants that are connected to that system. And that serves 65,000 people, or 76% of the city's population, so about 3/4.
Francisco, I think Joel has a question.
Yeah, Joel, go ahead. I'll answer it for you if I can.
All right,
It's not so much a question as an observation.
Sure.
That the city owns its own water supply didn't happen by accident. We've seen a lot of, like you said, other municipalities sell their water supplies off to private management companies, and some with disastrous results. And we had the opportunity to do that too some years ago, and I think wisely passed. The ability of Danbury to manage its own water resource, I think, is one of the key things. It's helps Danbury become a managed growth city.
Sure.
And I would hope that out of this report, there's not even a hint that we should consider selling off something as precious as our water resource.
I couldn't agree with you more. I don't believe there'd be any reason why we would suggest anything close to that. And in fact, we might want to go in the opposite direction and impress upon the readers of the document at how valuable and how critical this resource is, and that the city continue to have the resources necessary to maintain it.
I think, yeah, I just think, let me just see, Candace had a comment, I think, but she may have gotten bugged out. Are you there? Oh, there she is. Oh, maybe not. Candace, did you want to say something?
I keep losing and then you, Sharon.
Yep, gotcha. You're in. Yeah, your connection's not very.
Oh no, I'm okay.
Okay.
It was answered. Thank you.
All right.
Okay,
Well,
we're good.
We
keep going. All right.
All right. We'll keep going. And then, of course, if you're supplying the city with water, you need to carry the wastewater away, and that's the other half of this system. And once again, about half the city is served by the city sewer service. All of those shaded areas on the map are areas that are within the city's sewer shed. And let me explain that a little bit. All of those shaded areas, those kind of grayish brown colors, are areas where the city either currently provides service to properties and roads in that area, or has a policy to provide it if service needs to be extended to a particular road or property within those areas. So that's pretty much this map. We'll revisit this map as well as the public water supply map and other maps later in the process as we develop Danbury's future land use map, which is a very important component of the POCD and of state requirement. And as we think about areas where growth should be supported or encouraged with policies, that'll be very much tied to the infrastructure that's available and what's planned and what the city can and is interested in continuing to maintain. So what you'll see is not on this map is the very southern part of the city where presumably all those properties are on, septic tanks and leach fields. in the very northeast corner, of course, the northwest corner, those areas that aren't shaded.
Sharon,
Yes.
any suggestions on how to increase connection rates would certainly be appreciated coming out of the committee, because at this point, it's gotten essentially impossible to hook anybody up in an existing property. The only hookups are new construction. I think the last existing property we did was Jensen's, putting aside the West Side Interceptor. Sorry about that. I'm gonna mute. But yeah, it's next to impossible getting anybody hooked up.
Okay.
And why is that, Paul? Can you? I know your phone's ringing, but can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, it just stopped. We have to do a survey. We have to do a survey of residents, and basically it's money. When we cut a trench, Tim could actually weigh in on this. Some of the estimated bills in front of a piece of property could be as high as $50,000 to $100,000, and what they're doing is weighing the cost of a new septic system versus the cost of a one-time hookup. And yeah, you can spend $40,000 for a new septic system, but they're looking at like a one-shot deal, and to them it's cheaper than doing $60,000 or $70,000. It's a money thing. Grants, COVID infrastructure, things like that we're looking at to make this process easier. But at this point, when a potential customer gets the proposed bill, they just say, forget it. And we won't move into a neighborhood unless the overwhelming majority of that neighborhood wants to be hooked up. And what we find is there will be one or two people that are desperate because they have issues with their properties where a septic system could run $75,000. They really want to hook up, but nobody else does, so we don't do it.
Gotcha.
And I think if the state increased both the carrot and the stick, we would see higher compliance. But unless and until that happens, we're not laying new pipe. It's that simple. And I got to tell you, some of these meetings, we've had them at City Hall. I mean, they've been doing this for a while, can get extremely heated. The neighbors can get really worked up, both for and against. And I mean, like, you got to grab a guy and hold them back because they're almost coming to blows. We're talking about basically taking people and forcing them to spend $50,000 to $75,000. And boy, I'll tell you, that'll get your attention really fast. So yeah, no, we've just essentially stopped.
Well, that actually happened in my neighborhood. And what I think is fairly typical is there aren't a lot of neighborhoods left where sewer mains can go to gravity. So what we're finding is that the sewer main has to go to a low spot and a pump station has to be built. And then that pump station needs to pump up and over the hill, and usually through backyard easements. Pretty destructive to property. The whole ordeal becomes very expensive. You're not just trenching down the road and everybody's tying downhill into it anymore. I think a lot of those properties have gone by the wayside, and what we're looking at is amortizing the retired 5 people on the street that haven't had a house payment in years and don't care to have one now. And that's what I've seen has been occurring to get these systems so everybody's off of a septic system.
Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, Cornwall just got a $3 million, West Cornwall, where the covered bridges and all that stuff, just got a $3 million grant for a new sewer plant. We could use $3 million. Tim will tell you, if we got $3 million, we could hook up a lot of people. And I think we want that stuff being treated. We don't want it leaching into the groundwater in the city. It's really important, but we're at a crossroads. We just can't get these hookups. I've talked to people in the 6th, which is really hilly, and they'll be complaining, yeah, they want to put a pump station on my front lawn. I'm not going to let them do that. It's going to listen to it all night long, and it's going to leak and all this other stuff. Yeah, okay, we get it. We're not going to do it. And that's where it stays.
Okay. Well, I mean, these are issues that are directly related to a plan of conservation and development. I mean, they couldn't be more central. So thanks for mentioning that. All right. And finally, one of the most important elements of that system is the treatment plant itself. And fortunately, you're in the process of a significant upgrade and reinvestment in your facility. It is a regional facility that accommodates waste that either flows in or is trucked in from surrounding towns. And you're treating like 9 million gallons per day of wastewater and an average load of 10 million gallons per year of septage. That's after you take out the water. So the $100 million improvements that are ongoing will help comply with various requirements for reducing, contaminants such as phosphorus that are leaving the system. And as importantly, will allow for continued expansion and growth of the service area. So you'll have capacity to accommodate more users being connected to the system. So these are incredibly important investments, and it's good that they're being done now. It puts you in a very good position moving forward. All right. So we just did a lot of talking. I know we've had a few people chime in as we went along here, but are there any outstanding transportation or infrastructure issues or needs that you feel we didn't discuss this afternoon, or that the plan should really focus on and delve into? Anything at all that comes to mind?
Yeah, Francisco, if I may.
Yeah, please do, Fred. Go ahead.
Yeah, the information that's Sam gave, considering the supposedly downward draft of traveling and car traveling in the city, I'd like to know really how they came about that, because I've been here all my life, and I got to say, guys, I haven't seen anything improvement in the amount of traffic that we have in the city right now. It's really getting crazy. More and more out of state cars, and New York, Massachusetts, all over the place, New Jersey. A lot more 18-wheelers going through even on the side streets where I am in a southern part of the city. Day in and day out, they're going back and forth. I probably figured out now that it's become a cutoff for them to get either from 7 and 84 or to 7 and 84 or the town of Bethel or Ridgefield. I really think that we need to take a much better look at what they came up with those figures.
Well, so Fred, when you say they, you're talking about us, really.
Yeah.
And those numbers come from DOT. And Parker, do you want to just talk a little bit more about the index we generated and what it represents and what it doesn't represent? And Fred, we chose 12 locations across the city. One of those locations may not have been in front of your house, and so it doesn't mean that traffic hasn't increased significantly at another location in the city. This is it's 12 random locations spread across the city in some major corridors we selected. But Parker, can you talk a little bit more about those numbers and how DOT collects them and how we presented them?
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I think the data that we have is 2004 to 2018. So it's important to recognize, the last 3 years is not really included. There have been some counts since 2020. Of course, with COVID, we did not include those. Generally speaking, the 12 counts that we had in the city of Danbury, they're located on major corridor state routes, which is where the data is available. And as we alluded to in the presentation, I think something that we're finding is, for example, if those state routes are saturated in 2004 and no capacity improvements were conducted since that time, we wouldn't really expect much additional traffic on those routes in 2018. So I think we need to be careful and acknowledging that maybe this is the index of the major corridors. It's not reflective of necessarily even some of the busier neighborhood streets, as you mentioned, can be cut throughs. But we just simply don't have data because they don't tend to lay counters on local neighborhood streets, even if they are a cut through. So I think ultimately it might be just boil down to it's the data that we have available. But at the end of the day, that is the data that we got from DOT.
Yeah, Fred, if I could just interject, I mean, we had kind of a little bit of a preview, obviously, of the slides. And the first thing I said to Francisco was, we got to that slide. I'm like, yeah, no. I mean, we all know, what's going on. We live it, we drive it every day. We see, as you said, the license plates. There's, how could that be? That makes no sense. And I think it is by virtue of kind of where they took it, where the numbers come from the state. They're not at Mountainville and Southern. They're going to be on a state route when, as Parker said, the capacity limit is there, so it doesn't really change. It's the same. But we feel, I think part of it is people are getting off those major routes and cutting through the neighborhoods. I mean, it's a function of we're growing, and it's a function of people finding different ways to get to go through the city, which is, why they would be on Worcester, or why they would be, on Pecioke or Wildman or something like that, and not on Federal, even though we all see it on Federal. So I there's the numbers, and then there's kind of what we are living, and traffic is something that we need to address. We have to look at our roadway system. We have to look at what improvements we could make, what's feasible. I mean, some things are just not going to be feasible because we can't widen a road and, start taking people's properties. Roads built right up to property lines. So, we look at that on a regular basis with engineering, with, different divisions of public works on where we do roadways. But it's also tied to kind of our future land use plan. So
I think the navigation system too has something to do with it. Once they're looking for a place to get rid of I-84, and where to tell them to go is all your side streets.
Exactly. And that wasn't there in 2005. Nobody knew
No.
about Waze or Google Maps or anything. I mean, some people maybe, but I mean, but again, I just want you to know, and I want the committee members to know that, as staff, we recognize, look at the numbers, but we're living something different than kind of and so we have to figure out why that might be happening like that. Joel.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. I'm not offering solutions here, just an observation that I've bellyached about for a couple of decades, is that those of us who were around whenever they put the third lane through in 84, it was like, oh my gosh, I don't have a car within 100 yards of me because we have this extra lane. Well, anyone that is on the highway out there, especially northbound, after earlier than 4 o'clock, you're in a crawl because there are, I'll be blunt, idiots on the highway that don't understand you have to push down on the accelerator to go uphill at the same speed. And it stacks up. And it stacks up sometimes all the way past the New York border. And people get off with GPS and anything else. They find ways through the city to try to get around that mess. And I don't know that we have a real solution for it. I don't think we're going to get a 4th lane, nor do we necessarily want a 4th lane on 84, because it just entices even more traffic to the north. But the availability of the highway coming through makes it tempting for people to come and move north. And the more that happens, the worse the problem gets for us, because we can't, like Sharon says, we can't take Southern Boulevard and make a 4-lane out of it. It's not going to happen. It's 2-lane. It's kind of a narrow 2-lane in some spots. So I don't know what the solution is, but you know, there's definitely a combination of the interstate coming through, the additional traffic that's on the interstate, and people's frustrations to get around that mess.
Yeah,
I'll-
Joel, I might also add to that, the geometry of the interstate does not bode well, because
Right.
that just, the left-hand exit, the crossing over, the weaving, and Marcy knows all of this, and Roger, we sit in those meetings. I mean, that's part of the problem, how everything, how the, 7 meets 84, and 4, you're coming from New York, you want to get off at 4, but 7's intersecting, and it's problematic. And it's kind of sort of not the standard design, in 2020. So yeah, that's part of the problem too.
Like to also add, just to finish the conversation, I think we all understand the issues with I-84, Route 7, some of these major cut-through routes. When we take a look at Danbury as a whole, Danbury is a big place, geographically, almost 250 miles of roadway that the city maintains. So we take a look at traffic as a whole on all 250 miles of that. Potentially it's stable, but where we're seeing issues might be a very small percentage, 10% or less of those roadways. We could take another look and see if there's any highlights on some of those cut throughs, et cetera.
Yeah, I would also say let's, this would be a good topic to, reach out to Abdul and his staff and see if, as Jen mentioned to me, it's a great idea, see if there's any more local counts, or, we try to get some counts on, some local roadways, added to the planning studies that we've looked at, Arnie and Helen and you, Bob, you guys, Perry, Joel, you see it all the time. It's just kind of sort of using a different database, that's all, than the state.
Sharon?
Yeah, and I do want to remind everyone, we have a tremendous amount of ground to cover with the POCD, and typically, that level of detail is something that would be conducted through a citywide traffic management plan. I do think, well, the numbers are accurate, but the numbers are not representative of the entire city. And so what you tell us is as important as the numbers. And I think if there's anything we can do with the plan is to describe accurately what your experience is with traffic in Danbury, what's happening just from personal resident experience, and identify the need to better manage that traffic. And how is really the big question mark. And we can get, we can explore some ideas for how, but that is really the role of a citywide traffic management plan, which in and of itself is an effort about as equal as to the plan that we're doing now.
Right. Yeah, I would agree with that. That's so right. Set it up as that's a recommendation. Yeah. And then and then there's funding opportunities. Once that's done, it's supported, the need for it is supported, what it would include, and it gets carried over into our capital plan, and then we can seek some funding opportunities for that.
Yeah.
Richard?
Yes, just to piggyback on the issue here, I live down around exit 2 here, and pre-pandemic 84 used to be about maybe 4 o'clock was backed up. In the last, let's say more currently, at about 2:30 every afternoon, 84 is at standstill. And what's happening is the overflow, and perhaps attributed to the apps, is taking it down Mill Plain Road, which is creating a problem for the merchants there. And now we've got another supermarket that's intended to come there. So you can't move on Mill Plain Road. And they're coming through Ridgebury Road to go the back way down George Washington Highway to circumvent certain things to get onto Route 7 or to navigate downtown in City Hall. So it's just really becoming a nightmare, an absolute nightmare. And one of the first 2 slides when we first started, I was confused because it said the traffic on 84 was somewhat stable over the last number of years. So I don't know where the increase in cars have come from, but I've got to go down to City Hall at 6 o'clock tonight, and I've got to give myself a half hour to go from exit 2 to basically City Hall, which is absurd. It should be like a 10-minute drive or a 15-minute
Yeah.
drive.
Let me
So-
just say one other thing, Richard, because
Yeah, go ahead,
that's a
Sharon.
good point. When it pulls you off of 84 onto the local roads, see what that also does in terms of, I mean, that's a Hart bus route. So now the buses are further delayed.
Sure,
So
sure.
I think the objective is like, what can we support to help, finding options for people, other transit options than
Mhm.
people being just solely in their car. What will that free up? It will, free up capacity. The buses will move smoother, more people on the, if we can look at, that support of, more people on the trains and more people on buses.
Yeah.
And that will help, the capacity issue on the local
And
roads.
it's a deterrent too, to
If I
want to go
could
out to
jump in
dinner.
for just a second, I know we're wrapping up here. This is Arnie. Since the issue is traffic, I just wanted to make sure I got this in. I know we're ending. I've been working in Danbury for 35 years. I spent about 15 or 20 on Main Street. For the last 15, I've been over on the western side, Lee Farm Corporate Park. My job requires me to drive around city streets all day, every day for 35 years. I would observe that there are, I agree with Mr. Visconti, my dear friend, every other plate seems to be a New York plate. But in terms of having a terrible, awful time navigating city streets on a typical day, I haven't seen it. I mean, I agree with the comments made by Richard. 84 has become bizarre. I don't know what's going on out there. But just to simply navigate Danbury city streets on a typical day, maybe it's me, maybe I have a tolerance, but I don't see where it's that bad. I have a son that lives in Manhattan. I can show you gridlock. I've sat in it. I was on the FDR last weekend. So I know kind of bad traffic when I see it. And it's just, I personally haven't witnessed gridlock or anything like that on a typical day driving around Danbury to do something. I haven't. And if I did, I would tell you. Now, I agree, it's very strange. On the Planning Commission, when we look at these traffic reports, we look at morning peak and afternoon peak. Those are the big times, Yeah. And for some reason, I think as Richard said, when I go to work in the morning, I can get on 84 and zip right to Lee Farm Corporate Park with no traffic. But when I come home at 2:30 in the afternoon, going eastbound, it's bumper to bumper. I don't know what happened to change that, but it did. But so 84 is kind of a study unto itself. And AM and PM peak still mean something, but they've changed. But the typical city street getting around, I haven't seen a major problem. I haven't personally witnessed it, and I go everywhere all day long in Danbury. So I just wanted to be sure to get that in, because I just slightly disagree with some of my colleagues as to the scale of the problem.
So I can maybe chime in. This is Marcy Miller. And I know we're probably getting towards the end of our time frame, but one of the things that happens is consistent with, and Parker can chime in, with travel trends nationwide, is that we see more trip chaining in the afternoon that we don't see in the morning. And so you'll see people like picking up a kid from school, stopping at a store, doing this. And so that has gone into expanded the evening peak. And that's not just in Danbury, that's everywhere in the world. So, what we see now is we see a lot of that type of activity. It's not just A to B, it's A to B to C to D.
Okay.
Thanks, Marcy. All right, we've got a few minutes, and I do want to save a little time for Marcy to talk about launching our public engagement campaign. But are there any other comments, questions regarding infrastructure and transportation issue and needs?
Francisco, I just have one comment to make.
Yeah, Tim. Yep.
The city of Danbury has approximately 20 miles of unimproved private roads. And the reason I mention this, I actually consider a private road just like a condo association. We don't go in and maintain condo association property because we don't own any of it. Unfortunately, the people who own homes on private roads as many of our politicians and departments know, don't realize that's the case. They believe it's the city's responsibility to maintain and provide services for that road. As I just stated, the city doesn't own any of it. We don't own those properties that butt each other, and someone had formed an egress over the properties to get to your neighbor's property. So we don't have setbacks. We don't own the road itself, yet a large percentage of complaints through the departments are from those homeowners. So that's why I want to mention it, because people move into those neighborhoods and think that the city's
Right.
taking care of them and they have a private road, and they are unimproved roads, like 99% of them. And to
Yeah.
improve them, if we could improve them by purchasing property, like Sharon mentioned before, some of the setbacks would go right up to the, and sometimes through their homes. So it'd be very difficult, and it would be very costly for 20 miles of rebuilding from scratch roads. But I wanted to offer that to the committee to understand that's something that's going out there, and we have to kind of defend on a daily basis almost.
Yeah, Tim,
And
and Tim is
Tim, I
right.
just-
As
just-
Paul indicated, I mean, as Paul brought up in the water and sewer, it's the same, it's a road assessment project. It's the same kind of assessment project that happens when people, submit to take over the road. Well, once they see how much it's gonna cost to bring the road up to standards, they're like, yeah, no way. So, it's the
And
same.
Tim, I agree with you. And as a chairman of the planning commission, I'm not a fan of private roads. And I think I speak for some others when I say that they're just a problem, and nothing we can do about the ones that are already there, but we look at the others very carefully. But I agree with you philosophically. Private roads are a problem.
Yeah, they're a constant problem, Paul Rotello, and I'll tell you something else. They'll say to me, hey, listen, I'm paying the same taxes you are. Take care of my friggin' road. I don't care if it's private or not. Or give me a break on taxes. I mean, where do you go with that? 1952, when you're, okay, yeah, great. See you, pal. It's constant, never ends, and it's unsolvable.
True.
All right, any closing comments or questions?
Yeah, unfortunately, Fred, I'm gonna have to leave. I've got another meeting that I gotta get to by 6 o'clock.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thanks for joining us, Fred. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
All right, well, with that, I'd like to turn it over to Marcy.
Is anyone still listening?
Yes, of
All
course
right.
we are.
We are. We are.
All right. So we just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about the next steps and how we're going to deal with community engagement on this project through the fall. Obviously, with things changing in the COVID world, we left a lot up in the air when we wrote our scope and our community engagement plan. And so I can say that there's certain things that we said that we were interested in doing, and there's certain things that we said, let's talk about it with this group. So that's why we're here with you today. And one of the things is we want to kick stuff up this fall, and we're crossing our fingers that the numbers for COVID stay low and we can do some in-person things. And on my other projects in Danbury, we are monitoring things, and I'm talking with Angela at City Center, and I can go into a little more detail about that. But we have scoped about 10 meetings, and these could be focus group meetings. These could be pop-ups, events. It's any combination of these things. And that's what we've scoped to do. We would like to do some focus group meetings with people that are outside of this group. And then we would like to do potentially some pop-up events. And I think what we wanted to do is, and then before we do any of that, we want to launch a survey, an online survey that we can promote at any sort of pop-up. So I wanted to hear from people in this group, are there others that you think that we absolutely should be talking to? Number one. Two is, are there, pop-up events where we should go and have a table. And I'll say we're starting to, with the I-84 Danbury project, we have gotten permission from the department to go out for pop-up in-person events and have a table. And so we're starting to think about doing that in like select markets and places. Some of the city center events still aren't getting huge crowds from what I've heard from Angela. So we're just holding off on that a little bit. But so we wanted to talk to you. Number one, we wanted to start the survey. We want to get an okay to do that. And then number two, we want to hear your thoughts on pop-ups versus stakeholder events and who we need to be reaching out to.
Well, Angela, Marcy, we have a kind of an ongoing running list of people. I know you've seen that. And I think, from the department's perspective, and I'll just take the opportunity to go first. I think it's a combination of both those things. Yep. There are some bigger events planned for this fall. And I'll touch base with Roger on and get some more details that I think it's important for you to be at. Okay. I think the farmers market is, a good place for you to be as well. We'll get a timeline on that. It's very popular.
Yep. And I've done that before.
Yeah. And then, I think we need, some focus groups meetings or, on specific topics, right?
Do you have any people that you want us to target for those meetings?
Yeah, we can look at the list and kind of, assign some, and we'll continue to do outreach to be sure that kind of we're getting the community people that we think are important related to those topics.
So now, and we can talk offline about dates, but ideally what I'd love to do is I'd like to get a survey up and running before we go out anywhere, so we can use these events to promote the survey.
Right. So one of the biggest events is coming up, and I think it's the second weekend, Roger, if you're still on, in September. So that would mean over the course of the next couple of weeks, in order to present back to this committee, and I'm going to speak on behalf of the committee, for you guys to get this survey written, we can take a look at, are those the right questions, or however you tell us how you normally do it. But if you want to launch that, we need to get that up and done by the end of August, so that we can promote it in September when these events are occurring.
Perfect. So what I would like to do is I would like to work with Francisco through the rest of this month. We're halfway through July now. And then we'll get you a draft. And then once we have everything squared away in terms of questions, it's not that hard to put it into the programs that we use. So I think, it's just the approval process. So September 1st is not out of reach.
Okay. Does anybody have any issues with that kind of time frame? Any other new thoughts about it? It is time. And obviously, kind of the state of COVID and everything, held us up a little bit, I think. But now is the time to do it. Again, monitoring the situation, but we need to do this outreach. And we talked about Francisco and I going on Richard's show, so we can do that, and or kind of promoting the survey and public involvement in the process, because that is critical.
Okay, so we'll start moving forward on the survey if it sounds like that's in agreement, and then we'll talk about fall pop-ups, but we don't want to do any of them until we have the survey launched. Right. So our goal is to, let Francisco and I work. We'll get stuff to you, and then we'll be in touch about.
Right. That. And the next committee meeting is the 17th, I think, of August. So if we could get close to, getting stuff so that the rest of the committee can see kind of where we're going with that, and then we can just, tighten it up and get it launched.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right.
Good.
Great.
Everybody's okay with that, I presume? I'm not hearing anything. Okay, perfect.
Okay. Great. Well, Thanks, Marcy, for the overview. You'll be, hearing more from us as we get a little closer, and at our next meeting as well. So, a reminder that all of our meeting presentations and notes are available on our project website at www.danburypocd.com. And we continue to populate our key stakeholder list, which will be really integral to conducting those focus group meetings and with some of the other outreach. And so as you have people that you think should be participating in this process, please share that information with Sharon and Jennifer, and we'll continue to populate this list. With respect to our schedule, we're getting close to halfway there, and Sharon, Jennifer, and I were just talking about this the other day. We're going to have to, as we come into this fall, we're going to start to shift gears, and we're going to start to move out of this discovery phase and really start to put together the plan, which is a kind of a new process in and of itself. And so the nature of our meetings are going to change a little bit. They're going to turn into a little bit more working meetings where we're bouncing a lot of ideas off of you for feedback. And that will include, refining our vision for the city, developing goals around all of the important areas of the plan, developing an implementation plan, agreeing on an organization and format for the plan. So there's a tremendous amount of work to be done there, and that all falls under plan development towards the bottom there. Our very next steps, however, are in preparing for August's meeting. We'll be reviewing historic and cultural resources, and you'll hear from a couple of our staff on that. And we will review the online survey with you at that time. And of course, we continue to collect all of the data we've been presenting to you. Our next meeting, as Sharon mentioned, is the 17th of Tuesday at 4 o'clock. And, be prepared to talk about historic cultural resources and launching our community engagement campaign. So with that said, I'd like to thank all of you for attending this afternoon. A really good turnout, and I appreciate all of your comments and questions. And we have a lot of work to do, but I hope you enjoy the next month of summer.
Thank you so much.
Sharon,
Thanks. Yep. Thank you.
in closing.
I just want to again thank everybody for your time today. And again, this is, it's kind of the process that we laid out. We're going to kind of hone in on all these different component areas, and it will all come together. I know it seems like it might be taking a long time, but we'll get there. It's as was scoped and as we thought the process would be and should be, because we need to get all this background in order to make the recommendations for the future. So I think we're on target, we're on schedule, and thank Francisco and the team and Marcy. And I'm really looking forward to kind of getting out there and getting into the community and getting feedback from others. So it's super important in this process. So with that, I will take a motion to adjourn by anybody.
So moved, Arnie.
So moved.
Second, Perry.
Second by Perry. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
Aye.
thank you,
Aye.
everybody. Appreciate it.
Aye.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.